Welcome, one and all, throughout time and space for this episode of Weebs on the Weekends, the podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look on an anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode will cover the anime news for the third week of August 2021, as well as our thoughts on whether to resurrect or rebury the 2011 anime Kamisama no Memochou, aka Heaven's Memo Pad. My name is Sam Martinez. I'm a part-time weeb, full-time automobile mechanic, and with me, as always, is my co-host Jay Johnson, part-time weeb, full-time English language sensei. I was trying to think of a good segue, but the only thing that I can think of is your hair and just reminding me of Bleach, like how I'm just excited about the Bleach kick on. Because I think I mentioned last time how they were supposed to be doing a final arc in Bleach, and I'm just wanted to say I'm still excited.
I mean, you should be excited. It's pretty exciting prospects. I mean, we talked about last episode, like I fell down that bleach hole of trying to figure out why it was like so stagnant in my mind. But yeah, so I actually have like a weird kind of fade going on. So it's not really one for that character. And it's also thinking about there's a delinquent in Tokyo Revengers that has like white platinum hair as well, but he has it on the sides and his like he has a low cut essentially or undercut with the white hair. So I kind of vibe with that look for probably next time. So like put the white down on my sides instead of a wide mohawk that I have right now.
Are you saying you're trying to join a moped gang?
I don't know. I was looking at a scooter this morning, so maybe the scooter gang. There's not any really. Oh, there are gangs where I am, but and the only thing I was thinking about before we started was how far away my kitchen is. Even though it was like a couple of steps away, I was trying to get a time for our countdown, and I was like, yeah, I'm totally going to be late for the countdown. And Sam's going to have to wait a couple of seconds before he starts with his opening.
It's okay. I've made you wait before. It's only fair.
All right, cool. Excellent. So, other than that, been doing pretty good. School's in full session, or at least I have pre-planning this week with like my school's administration and getting together with the curriculum because they're still kind of up in the air with all the quarantine restrictions that have kind of basically cut down some of the attendant rates across schools like nationwide because again they're trying to implement this like distancing where like masks are required as of like a coding regulation and then like classes have to be under a certain number of students. The students have to sit a certain distance away from each other. So that means like private schools can't accept like probably 60%. They can only accept about 60% of their expected enrollment numbers. And that basically impacts how much money they can spend in a year. So, and even as a teacher, I kind of have to deal with that as a foreigner kind of stuck abroad and finding the best situation for it. But my school seems to be very understanding of my situation being a foreigner stuck abroad. So I'm pretty good. How about you, Sam? How's your week going?
No. That's. I'm glad that they're at least being not catering, but at least sympathetic to your situation. It seems like that's not the only issue that's been going on because at the schools in my area, there's been a spike in the pandemic as well. One of my coworkers, his kids, he had to go home because somebody in his class had tested positive, and it's kind of weird too because, well, weird and not, like when he was basically sent home on Wednesday, and throughout the rest of the time he's going to have to do online classes, and then for him to go back to school he has to test negative, right? But the thing is, it has to be like the day before, and it's sad because some of the urgent care places, uh it's a place that I go to so I can get tested, because I need to show a negative test results to go into some of the places that I need to for my work. Some of the places are getting such a huge influx of people that they've begun to limit what person that they can see. For instance, some of the places that I've been to, if you're not exhibiting symptoms, they're not going to see you at all. So, like, that's just how many people are going to be tested, I guess, because of fear of having the pandemic. I'm sorry, not having the pandemic, but at least like having the virus. So it's a little frustrating that some of these kids who want to be able to go back to school may not be able to get back into school because some of these places won't test them because they aren't exhibiting symptoms. But I guess like it's more of like a case by case basis because the place that I go to, they know that I need it for my work. And so despite them having that new policy, they'll still see me. So hopefully they'll treat it like more specialized that way.
Right, because you're a worker in the healthcare industry, so it's kind of, yeah, it's not like a special case, but like you have to draw that line to say like healthcare workers are exempt because of the reason that they're healthcare providers. So if they're not the ones always constantly being checked, then
Hmm.
it just adds to the infection rate or potential exposure. And even like we're both familiar with Ho Chi Minh City. I don't know if you're talking to anyone constantly there. But yeah, most
Yeah.
recently they had like this explosion of infection, or the infection
Really?
rate kind of exploded. So actually, the government decided to lock down Ho Chi Minh City to the point of zero. What do you call it? It's not a curfew because no one's actually allowed out on the streets, and the National Guard has essentially been called in to lock down the city as well as delivering rations to people that are just going to be stuck at home. So I think they gave a couple of days notice to like people to stock up and like say, oh, you're going to be locked in your house for the next 2 weeks. So that's what's going on in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam right now. Yeah, because again, like I'm in contact with expats, worldwide, and just kind of getting their perspective about how their countries are really treating them as foreigners. So uh, my friend there is like by himself, so he's like in a single household. He's a foreigner, and he's like really concerned that like the police department is really the only one that really knows that he's there. So he's not sure if he's going to get his rations because it's a military operation essentially. So it's a
Yeah.
very weird case in Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam right now. But other than that, do you want to move on to some anime news, probably to lighten the mood? Yeah, so as always, time codes are going to be in the description, and we're going to talk about later on Heaven's Memo Pad, which is a wrong translation because the Japanese is Kamisama, which Kami literally means God.
Yeah, so it's like probably like God's memo pad, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just like a weird translation, but that's how it's coded in most places. So first news story for today is basically a follow up to past news stories, but the Berserk manga is going to be releasing a memorial issue towards or for its creator. So earlier
Mhm.
this year, back in May, the mangaka Miura passed away. He's known for being the creator of the Berserk manga, which is a highly beloved series that really hasn't been given its due justice. We talked about the atrocious adaptation back in 2016 and 17, as well as the pretty faithful anime trilogy back in 2012 and 13, as well as even going farther back to 1997 for adaptations. Is like it's always trying to be captured because of
Yeah.
Mamura's way of depicting like these horrific Lovecraftian monsters with the story of the Black Swordsman Guts.
Guts.
Yeah, and his like revenge tale against like his best friend. And there's so much horror that he depicts like so well that this new coming issue, which is going to be released in Young Animal, is going to have basically a booklet and a poster of some of Mimura's Miura like most iconic scenes. Like it's really hard to pull out like masterpiece after masterpiece. So there's no
Yeah.
hints about what that might be, what this poster might be, but I'm very much looking forward to. So I'm kind of connecting this to your news story about the comic book day in
Oh,
the West.
even a better connection too, right? Because I'm looking at the article here, and it's saying that the publication over here in the Americas, it's by Dark Horse Comics, and Dark Horse is the same people that's known for Hellboy.
Yeah, exactly. Because Dark Horse and Vertigo are kind of like the adult comic books, quote
Hmm.
adult comic books, because it always leans into these like very highly graphic and adult themes. But yeah, Dark Horse was responsible for the volumes. I think there's the deluxe volumes, the
Hmm.
Berserk. manga in the West, and well as the republication of the manga in 2019, I believe. But just to bring us around to why this is really important is that this is basically the last work by this mangaka, and I'm not really interested in buying the manga for the sake of the story because it's one of those things of the Berserk manga has always been on like this long-standing hiatus, essentially, kind of similar to Hunter Cross
Hunter x
Hunter
Hunter.
or Hunter x Hunter,
Yeah.
whatever you want to say, however those different weebs call it. But it's always been like a uncompleted symphony, I guess. And I'm not keyed into that. It's like one of those things like you're going to be let down, essentially. So it's like one of those things like we're all waiting for One Piece to end, well,
Yeah.
that's just me and my personal opinion. I'm just waiting for One Piece to end. But if Oda passes away, like, what was the point? But I just want to say that this is going to be a new issue that's going to be released on September 10th. So, Sam, do you have any interest in picking this up? That Amazon has it republicized and reprinted, and it even cracked the top 10 best-selling books earlier this year. So, do you have any
Oh
interest in
wow.
grabbing issue one, or maybe a deluxe copy, or finally checking out now that there's going to be a memorial issue released?
I I wasn't thinking about it mainly because, like you said, once I started, I'm going to be let down because I know it's not going to be finished. I mean, even though because didn't they say that the person who was sort of spearheading it wasn't it a good friend of my Miura and sort of like knew how to piecemeal it together?
Essentially, it was like someone that was closely related, like assistant
Hmm.
and like student of him, and that imitation is like what is it called? Like imitation is the greatest form of flattery, but
Yeah.
it's one of those things of just a not carbon copy, but essentially you want the original creator to do it, but like this has been close
Hmm.
enough that no one can really tell unless it's a good forgery, I guess, is the way you can really talk about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of been the case for the Berserk comic, that
Okay.
it's been a forgery up to a point.
I guess I've just been burned by I've been burned by Game of Thrones because they did the original Full Metal Alchemist route where they went past the source material and they tried to make their own ending, and the hubris of those guys made the last few seasons of that show complete torture. And so, like I said, I've been burned by that, and so now whenever I hear about works being done by people who claim to be so close to the original creator, it's like, you say that, but I don't trust you. That sort of thing. But I feel as though that would, or at least like I would hope that with a work as popular as Berserk, that they would give it its due diligence because of how faithful the fans are. I feel as though if they had just slapped any old chapter together and threw it out there, that there would definitely be some backlash because of what Miura did for the anime community.
Exactly, because even if you look at what Netflix is doing with the Cowboy Bebop adaptation, like no one, like I'm sure the anime community would just like thrown a hissy fit if Watanabe wasn't on board as like a
Mm-hmm.
supervising or as a at least a consultant, which he is. So yeah, it's a case of paying faithful, adaptation credit to a property that is not just a forgery. And we probably won't be getting another Berserk anime, but I think at least having a memorial issue where it's going to have like a segment, let's just call messages to our creator, or messages to the creator, as well as that
Mm-hmm.
poster that I mentioned. So I might get this just as one of those historical
Like collectibles.
timepieces. Yeah,
Yeah.
collectible, but it's more like how do you honor someone that really passes away? Just kind of getting
Yeah.
their last work, kind of either on like
Do we
a
know if
poster,
it's going to be like a limited?
booklet, and poster. It's going to be it's just going to be standard release with the issue. So there
Oh,
doesn't seem
okay.
to be any cap to its publication. All right, so on to our next news story. This is somewhat of another, again, follow up to something that we've already talked about, but maybe something interesting enough to say that the streaming service Verve. VRV, has also
Hmm.
been included with the acquisition of Crunchyroll by Funimation. I forgot how long this news story has been kind of been circulating around because it was back in August of 2020 when the first bid for Crunchyroll went out. Like AT&T said, "Oh, Sony, or the world, they were looking for multiple buyers, but AT&T was very interested in selling Crunchyroll like in the second quarter of last year for the summertime, saying, "Yeah, we will sell Crunchyroll for $1.5 billion." And in August, oh no, sorry, that was the price in August. By December of last year, the price was lowered to 1.175 billion. And Sony Pictures Entertainment, I think that's the full company's name, was like, "Yeah, we'll buy it up because we already own Funimation." And it came out recently that because of like the partnering deals of certain streaming service, this also includes Verve. So Verve is now under the Sony Pictures Entertainment branch, and
Oh my
Verve.
goodness.
I did not know this about Verve, but Verve
Yeah.
has like these big conglomerate of media creators. They have Rooster Teeth, they have
Yeah.
Cartoon Hangout, they have Mondu, and they
Yep.
have High
Mondo was
Dive.
there.
They have High Dive,
Yes.
and I was like, wow, how did I not realize this? Because I remember when Verb was created like 5 or 6 years ago, and I was at I think it was AWA, and I was like, what's Verb? Who cares? If I knew it at the time that they were going to blow up or how much influence they were going to have with how media is archived on the internet, I would have bought in like day one. But Sam, do you use Verb? What streaming service do
I
you actually use? So now that
no
they're all under one branch, it's just like Crunchyroll, Funimation, and then Netflix.
no. So essentially, like what I've been doing, I've been using I had gotten in on Crunchyroll when you could still get Crunchyroll as a free app, right? Where you can watch it with the commercials. And I had also gotten a free High Dive. Oh, not High Dive, but a free Verve account. And sometimes what would be on Crunchyroll won't be on Verve and vice versa. But usually Verve is more robust, like you said. It has different ones. They even have, I think it's called Chiller or Thriller, where it's just this sort of pseudo channel where you can have all this types of horror, both I think Japanese and Korean, which is very very interesting. But I think like usually to get those types of things, you have to get like a Verb subscription. But the cool thing about the Verb subscription, right, is it's not just to one of those channels. Like once you have that subscription, it's to all their content. And there was another streaming video that they had on there. It was Dan Harmon's Harmon Quest, where essentially the creator for Community would sit down and play a game of D&D with some of his celebrity friends. And it's fun because they would essentially like animate the sequences of them interacting with one another and with the DM. So it's been fun. It's more of like a mixed bag of streaming services that's not just anime. Usually like I would hop around from Crunchyroll to Verve. I just recently got the Funimation subscription, so I would do that, and it's just crazy that they're allowed to do all this because they essentially have a monopoly on anime in the West now. Funimation, or at least Sony does, because you have Funimation and Crunchy. I mean, unless there's another streaming service that I don't know about.
Right. Yeah. It's hard to seem like again like from December is when like the official bid was placed in, and then and also this was not any stocks. This wasn't any like layer any property transfers. This was just pure hard cash. So that was the other thing, like $1.1 billion in cash to AT&T for
Oh my
Crunchyroll,
goodness.
which I think is fair for the library that Crunchyroll has. But again, with the details of the merger or the acquisition, there's no stated plan or like publicized plan about how
Mhm.
Crunchyroll and Funimation are going to merge if they even, because it might make more sense to leave them separate and leave the mass audience confused about what anime service or which service is the best for them because they can just double charge people or triple charge people thinking that they need to go somewhere when they don't need to go somewhere. It's an interesting story. Hopefully, we'll talk about this never again because it's just going to be a new world order after this.
I don't know. Maybe because now that I'm thinking about it, right? Because the only other people that have some skin in the anime game, at least streaming wise, it's Amazon, Hulu, and Netflix. So I'm thinking like maybe Amazon or Hulu and Netflix, maybe they'll try to join forces to take down this behemoth that Funimation and Crunchyroll has become. Who knows?
Yeah, because like what you just mentioned, like I think because of you can make a case that yes, they have a lion's share of the anime um,
Yeah,
control, but that it's not covering all animated properties because even with HBO Max has a lot of titles under
that's
them. I
right.
think
That's
they have
right.
all of
Yeah,
Simpsons, I think. But I know most recently they like got a lot of acclaim for pushing through a lot of those Adventure Time side stories and
yeah.
films.
But even with HBO partnered up with Crunchyroll, so that's just feeding.
Oh yeah, very true. Yeah, because even though it's not included, they still have a partnership. So I think
Yeah.
that's why the value is so. That's probably why the value dropped, just because maybe just because a lot of partnerships exist, but not a lot
Mhm.
of other sources are under the Crunchyroll banner at the time. So on to our third news story. Where shall we take this? Let's talk about the My Hero Academia movie because that
Okay.
premiered back on August 6th, and we kind of skipped over that it premiered. But the news story is has grossed 14 million US in its first 10 weeks. So we're recording this like 2 weeks after, so this would be like its third weekend. So we'll see how
Mhm.
it tracks for this third weekend's opening. But for the first 10 week or first 10 days, it grossed 14 million, where this has basically outdone its previous installment, which was is it Two Heroes Rising? Which was the second one? Heroes Rising? Heroes
Heroes
Rising.
Rising. Yeah.
Yeah, was the second one. So Heroes Rising in the same amount of time only grossed 3.8 million.
Oh.
And or sorry, its opening weekend it grossed 3.8 million. But for this third movie, which is World's Heroes Mission, gross its opening weekend 8.5 million. Okay, so that's weird numbers, but basically just as twice as much for its opening weekend. And the story is basically this. I don't know if they're quirkless. I don't. It's not really clear about the synopsis, but it's a anti-quirk organization has planted bombs across the world. So it seems like the plot of the story is just like all these heroes from across the world are going to unite to save the world, essentially,
Mhm.
and follow our, intrepid heroes Deku, Bakugo, and Todoroki. Again, those are the main focus characters of the stories, which is probably coinciding with the Endeavor internship arc that's going
Yeah.
on right now, or will have ended right now, and we're going into the My Villain Academia arc right now with the manga. But part of that is also, I guess, really because this third movie isn't supposed to happen because like the second movie hasn't really appeared to have any consequences in the manga. The first movie had the shields, and even the gauntlet that shows up in the first movie appears in the manga. But
Yeah.
anything from the second movie hasn't really had any effect on the manga. And this third episode is, I mean, this third movie is also, it's weird. I'm thinking
You
out
know,
loud.
no. It's very similar to some of the Dragon Ball Z movies, right? It's hard to tell like what's canon and what's not, or even in with the Naruto movies, right? Because that was one thing that I hated about the Naruto movies because he would have some sort of super powered up Rasengan that you're never going to see ever again. And in the movie, they make it seem like the best thing since sliced bread. And it's just like, oh come on, this is like the 17th version of the Rasengan that I've seen.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, there's no plans right now for when this third film is going to hit the U.S. or foreign markets. And I think a lot of the importance of this is always because of Horikoshi, who's come in each of these movies to be like the character design artist as well as the supervising director on it. So like it still has those feels of the manga, and it's just a little bit of a shame that it isn't really canon. Like the second movie and the third one aren't really canon yet.
Yeah.
So we'll just see how it turns out. But Sam, have you heard anything good about this movie?
I've just seen some stills. I'm glad that I haven't really seen anything spoilery wise. The only thing that I've really seen is pictures or video of Rhodey, the new character that it's introducing with Deku. I guess like just showing them like walking around doing stuff. I guess he's going to be important. I'm looking at your article as well, saying that the theater goers are going to be receiving a bonus manga volume that goes along with the movie. And oh damn, the volume's only limited to 1 million copies, so I don't think we're going to get any of those over here in the West.
Probably not. I saw some people on posting like their issues or their when they went to theaters on Instagram.
Yeah,
So it seems like a limited resource, and given how much it grossed, those million copies are done and gone. So, all right. So moving on to our last news story is talking about you know really who's writing these stories because it says the title of it is soccer manga, but if it was like coming from Japan, they would call it just football. But the
yeah.
football manga Blue Lock has received an anime adaptation that is set for 2022. So this is a manga that's been highly praised in the past couple of years. It basically was released on the Weekly Shonen manga back in 2018. It has this giant following, about 4.8 million copies are in circulation right now or have been sold, and more are in circulation. But this is a manga series that is done by, oh, let me try to not mess up their names, but is a dual manga artist and writer,
Okay.
where is Kana Shiro and Nomura. And they basically won the Kodansha Best Manga Award, which is kind of a free ticket to getting an adaptation. And the only thing that really caught my attention with this news story is that the script supervisor for the series is the same script supervisor for Haikyuu. So Haikyuu is back in the news. But I think that is very important when it comes to these sports anime. If you're putting like this battle shonen trope on top of a sports anime, you have to really have a powerful script behind it because the studio is 8-bit, which really I was looking at the filmography for 8-bit, and I can't really say they warrant this doing this anime because we've talked about them earlier this year with Infinite Stratos,
Yeah.
and we know them from doing Reincarnated Slime. So, like, they have a good control of animation, and I'm sure they'll do a fine job. But for how beloved Blue Lock is, it seems like a weird matchup. So the premise is that after losing the World Cup in 2018, the Japanese Football Union basically gathers 300 of Japan's best and most promising young players to find their next ace striker. And, Battle Royale, you guys want to do the best for the future and be the next best. Who's a good soccer player from the Japanese team?
Oh, oh, Japanese. I was about to. I was about to give out some Argentinian name there.
Oh, well, who would you give out? Who would you give out?
No, like the ones that I know that come to mind. There's Christian Ronaldo. He's from Spain, but Messi. That's the Argentinian guy.
Yeah.
Those names are big. When we were younger, there was David Beckham.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. Yeah. I was thinking about some Japanese superstars, but yeah, it's funny because like all these mangas about sports have gotten me into sports because like I was even tracking Messi's transfer to, oh, what team did he just transfer to? Oh god, now I'm blanking on the team, but the team names. But yeah, following
Hmm.
certain football players' careers now is like, yeah, that's what manga does. It's like same thing with Haikyuu. I started following some of the Japanese nationals on their volleyball team. But
Well, that's a good testament to the manga because even when the Olympics came out, my coworker, him and his son, they love haiku. And during the Olympics, they were watching volleyball and they were able to understand what was happening because haiku did such a good job. on portraying the sport and having you feel the love for the sport as well. So if done properly, you'll be able to get sucked into the fandom of the sport that it's relishing in, like how what's his name, Hajime no Ippo, right? How that's big for the boxing community, or Kuroko no Basket. It gets people involved in basketball. Like if it's done very well, then it means that the work is doing good if you want to go out and play that same sport.
Yeah, that's fair. It's just like one of those things I'm kind of like sketchy about because of like 8-Bit's limited filmography, because
Mhm.
Haikyuu was done by Production IG, so they're kind of known for their kinetic choreography, which we talked about in depth before about. But yeah, I'm just kind of weary about it. But Sam, does it sound like something that you might want to pick up or add to your manga reading list, Blue Lock?
Oh, I definitely want to check out the manga. I'm sorry, not the manga, but the anime, because I'm looking at the promo again, and it's gotten me excited. As you said, it's more of like a battle royale, and it's a different take on the sports genre. It sort of reminds me here in the U.S., right, where you have these free agents in American football, how they have to go through different what's it called, like different training camps, so that they can be scouted for certain teams, or like when certain teams are putting out like these days where you can walk on and you can scrimmage and things like that. And I never got to see that from soccer's perspective, and so the fact that they're doing that with soccer, it's giving me, it adds a new layer of the sport that I've never had a chance to see before, because they're asking to look for a superstar player, which is something that's usually very big in basketball, that helps support a basketball team. And I never really thought that you would need to have a superstar player in soccer like that for a team to be successful. So, like I
Yeah.
said, it adds a new viewpoint on soccer that I never thought about before.
All right. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not. I'm looking forward to it, but it's like one of those things of, yeah, I don't know if the studio can handle this kind of thing. So I'm skeptical until I see like the first actual
Give him a
trailer in
shot.
motion. Yeah, give them a shot. Yeah, because I love slime, but nothing in slime makes me say like, oh yeah, they can definitely do a football soccer anime, because it's going to be very important to hone into that battle shonen death game kind of dynamic
Yeah.
and make it really heartfelt. But given that the script supervisor is the one that does Haikyuu, I'm kind of hopeful for it. But that is the end of our news for this week, Sam, and we're moving on to your 10-year anime review of Gods or Heaven's Memo Pad. So what's up with that?
Thank you, Jay. And as always, descriptions of the time codes are in the dibbly doo box below. And essentially, the reason why I chose this was, I think I had mentioned it last time, was because of the descriptors for the anime. Again, it said that it was a mystery type thing, and that's one of the genres that I gravitate towards too. And have you heard about this franchise or this work before?
Not at all.
Watching it
This
today?
is, yeah, this is completely a surprise, and it is by jcstaff. And
Hmm.
jcstaff turns out so much um, productions in a year, and I'm just not surprised at all that this never caught my attention, even though it has so many
Uh,
aspects that I just love in media. So
So is Jay Z staff like the Ubisoft in the anime industry, where they just put out so much stuff?
yeah, that's really hard to tell, because it's like we talked about how like you love is it wrong to pick up girls in a dungeon,
Yeah.
and they also do fairy tale, but then they do something like this, and it's like, where's your barometer really? Like they don't really have one sense of this is who J Staff is. They just do
They're
so much
saying you
work.
can't box me, bit. I am everything and everywhere.
Exactly.
No, but just to give a bit of a synopsis on Heaven's Memo Pad, aka Kamisama's Memochou. essentially we follow this character known by Narumi Fushijima, who basically is nomadic in nature because of his father's work. And he's not anywhere long enough to make any friends, so he always feels like an outsider. And at this new place that he lived in, he is essentially invited into the garden club by a classmate by the name of Ayaka Shonizaka. And while he's hanging out with her, she takes him to her part-time job where it's a ramen noodle shop. And while he's there, he runs into some of her other friends. One of them being Alice, who is the head of this quote unquote neat detective agency. Neat standing being the acronym that stands for not in education, employment, or training. And essentially Alice stays at home and she has the typical hacker setup where she has 50 bajillion screens and she can peer into the world without having to leave her room, but she has to have she has to have Grubhub or I'm trying to remember the other food supply dash, but essentially have to have Grubhub before Grubhub existed to bring her food. But essentially, we follow Narumi as he starts to become friends with both Ayaka and Alice, and how they go on their escapades in dealing with criminal cases, as well as the community within the city that they live in. And as you said before, this was done by Studio jcstaff, and the original source for this work was a light novel series. Again, it's in the genre of mystery. Duration is about 26 minutes per episode, and its rating is R to 17 plus. And it is also available off of High Dive. Now, Jay, I know that we had mentioned this before the podcast, how essentially it seems like the year of 2021 is just the year of detective duos. This is what, like the third detective duo work that we are reviewing.
Yeah, for like 2011, it was like such a odd year because like most recently for this season, it was the detective's already dead. Oh, even It Invaded last year was a detective story as well as Babylon. So like
Yeah, but
detective
like, would it
stories
be
are
considered a detective duo though?
no, yeah, that's what I mean. It's like
Yeah, yeah.
detective stories are few and far between, and then
Oh,
even
okay, yeah.
when you get into the detective pairing of like buddy cop adventure, essentially, like
Hmm.
2011 was such a strong year. Okay, that's not fair to say, but it was a plentiful year for that trope because we covered Gosick and we covered Dantaleon or the Mystic Archives of Dantaleon,
Yeah,
which are both the same idea of small girl genius and dude trying to help her out essentially.
pretty
So this
much.
is our third third look at this kind of genre subgenre.
Yeah, and again, like this was my pick, and I know Dantalian was my pick. Was Ghostic my pick as well?
Yes.
Damn. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry, Jay. I did not mean for this to happen.
No, it completely caught. Yeah, like we didn't realize that until this one because you didn't
I
consciously
didn't
know you were
know.
doing that, so it's no
No,
problem.
but again, I would say I'm just trying to think of like what makes this one different than all the other ones. The thing that stood out the most to me was how akin to Black Lagoon this was, because in a sense of like when in the synopsis when I had mentioned that they dealt with criminal organizations, they really mean it. For some, and it's weird, right? For people who claim to be not in education or in training, even though one of them is technically in college, so he should not be considered a neat. The gun toting kid, he's still in college, so he shouldn't be considered a neat. But anyways, how Alice has connections to the underworld. She has a direct link to a yakuza boss because he is the only one that she trusts to sew her stuffed animals together, like whenever she accidentally rips them. And I don't remember how she found out about his skills. I think she knew about him before he became a crime boss, but when they go and they try to transport the teddy bear, he's there giving a lecture to all of his underlings and stuff like that, and he's still trying to have the boss leader motif going on, having them telling them to put the teddy bear in the box and to put it in the back, and he'll get to it when he can, and trying to not let his subordinates see him because like macho manly stuff. But it was just like I said, like they have actual connections. For instance, one of the other neats, he I don't know his name, but he's the bigger guy that's always talking about fighting, but he's about that life. And he can throw hands and he can essentially outgrift a whole lot of people if he wanted to. So it's just the myriad of characters and the fact that when she says that she has connections to the underworld, she really does. So it has, like as I said, it has that Black Lagoon feel, especially because the main character jumps into that world headfirst for the sake of Alice. What about you, Jay? Did you make a similar comparison, or am I off base?
Yeah, I didn't see the Black Lagoon comparison because I haven't seen Black Lagoon, and
Oh,
but so I readily made the comparison between this and Durara, which again is
okay.
another episode we've talked about, or another series we've talked about in the episode. And the idea of this basically aimless, I really love that word milk toast now, but this bland, unambitious nobody essentially. Like as you said in the synopsis, is that he's been a transfer student all his life, and he gets into high school and he's like, I've made it. Even in his opening monologue, he's like, I've made it a skill not to remember anybody because what's the point? And that's kind of
Hmm.
his demeanor. He's kind of very pessimistic about his own life. And it's weird that these are always the focus of light novels, that they take these uninterested individuals and just tell a story where they're caught up in like the course of other people's lives. So everyone in the Neat Detective Agency is so interesting. And like what you were going on about
Hmm.
the kid who's in high school or he's in college, but like even in his opening introductions, he's like, "Oh, I want to stay at university for 8 years because in the Japanese education system, you can only stay at a university for so long without graduating." So that's why he's technically considered a NEET because
Oh,
he actually
yeah.
doesn't have a degree, but he's also a military buff. So there's this weird thing that he wants to do is like establish a library for military history and kind of promote that kind of culture of gun owning, which is a weird thing in Japan. So that's kind of why he's a NEET as well, because he doesn't fit inside the like cultural expectations that he should have, as well as there's a host playboy character who's called Hero. The character you mentioned is a boxer, but he has a gambling addiction. So all these characters are very colorful, and then you have this bland milquetoast main character introduced into this and just caught up in their lives. And even like the ramen shop owner, who is
Hmm.
probably the closest to Black. Who's the main character in Black?
Yeah, Remy.
Rim.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, like you
is
said.
and her name is Min. So she's a badass with like a tank top, and she just owns it because in the first episode she gets introduced, which the first episode is about prostitution. So these are real world crimes that they're trying to solve, but they're going about it with a very altruistic and um, bottom dollar kind of basement kind of mentality. And then in the second and third episode, which are basically part ones and part two, is
Hmm.
about money laundering. So the connection to Durara that I see is that in Durara there's like gangs and there's like death threats and there's secret organizations and they have the supernatural element to this. But this is just a down to earth story about coming to age in which I'm thinking that Japan is a more dangerous place than I think, or is that they're trying to sell it in animes that Japan is a lot more dangerous than people think. You know, they have the Yakuza, of
Yeah,
course, which the fourth is the gang leader. That's his name,
yeah.
and that kind of sells the idea that he's a young Yakuza boss. So they're all involved in some kind of criminal activity in some kind of way. and not Dantaleon, but Alice is a genius hacker. She's a hikikomori, which you said before, which just means shut in. And her gimmick is that she's very aloof, she's very detached, but she feels very much responsible for the human condition. Is that she has this genius level of she has this high IQ that she feels so responsible for. Like if she was so connected to the world, then she should have done something with like wars and
Yeah.
poverty. And it immediately
She
endears you to her character because she's a small girl. She can't even open up chopsticks. It's like her introductory scene. Like she can't even break
yes.
chopsticks. And her room is like she has the AC blasting, which Japan is notoriously hot for. And then her whole room, she's the man in the chair, but her bed is full of stuffed animals, and how she speaks is very pompous and childish as well. So carrying over with the Dantaleon connection as well as Dosik, but not tsundere, but just kundere, I guess, about it. So
Yeah.
everything that is solid in those first three episodes really sells the story because it's only 12 episodes. It's based off the light novel, like you said. There's only 9 volumes of the light novel, as well as there's a manga that follows it, but that's only 3 volumes. So it's a solid story, solid introduction, and most enjoyable part for me was the cast and the characters.
Oh no, definitely. And I would have to say, like, as you said, Alice's character, her essentially taking Uncle Ben's words to heart, great power and things of that nature. She has this great sense of responsibility of, what she doing what she can. And I think, and I'm glad that you brought that back up because I wanted to do a rewatch to see why Narumi took to Alice as quickly as he did. One of the things that made me appreciate this, especially compared it to Black Lagoon, because in Black Lagoon you have Remy, who is the gun-toting, rambunctious character, and then you have I forgot what his name was, but essentially the business type looking guy, who is essentially this salaryman who's thrown into this world of corruption, espionage, and literally lives on an island where that's the rule of law. And throughout the whole show, if not the whole show, most of the show, he has so much pushback on trying to adjust to his new way of life, mainly because he's essentially trying to uh, lie to himself that he is in fact a good person, whereas doing the things that he's done, you realize that that's not the case. He's like he's against like accepting the truths, whereas with this kid, he doesn't become obsessed, but he becomes enamored, or he respects Alice so much that he essentially changes from being milk toast to being active in his own agency. For instance, in the third episode, he pledges loyalty to the fourth so that he can become more useful to Alice. Right? He is actively working on bettering himself so that he can be more useful to her. He even picks up a part-time job at the ramen shop. That way, he can help give her her bowl of scallions in chicken broth, right? That's noodleless ramens, or like the fact that like he changes so much. And that was a question that I was going to ask, was like, why do you think that was? But after hearing what you said, how endearing she is and how she takes the responsibility of her gifts to you know to heart, to such a degree, like it becomes more endearing that it makes you want to help this person complete their goals.
Right, because there's this really kind saying that introverts don't don't gain friends, extroverts adopt them. And I think
Yes.
that like even though she's not an extrovert, she does command the presence. Like even like before we introduced to Alice, that these tough guys or like this playboy, this boxer, this gun nut, they all receive a call from Alice, and even on the first ring, they pick it up. So immediately you get a sense of the respect she commands among these different types of like meats, and I
Hmm.
think that's just part of her appeal. And again, like selling the idea of this like Lolita kind of girl genius, like it didn't work in Ghost, it worked in Dantaleon, and it works here because of the intrigue that you get from her. Like, you don't know if she's terminally ill in these first three episodes. Why is she
Hmm.
running the AC? Why is she talking this way? How is this like 12-year-old girl? Why is she so faulting herself for the problems of the world at large? So I think that's what you're supposed to feel from like the milk toast perspective of the main character, is that he doesn't have anything going on with his life, but they do, or she does. So if I stick around long enough, I might find out something for myself. I might find meaning by, attaching myself onto these people, even though like his first reaction to them is like, why would I want to be involved with these people? But then, like you said, he over the first course of the episode, he becomes endeared with her. He even
Hmm.
commits to becoming a criminal, essentially, in the second and third episodes, and I think that makes him a lot more likable. So, like, milquetoast is a very unfair statement or describer for him, but it is a coming to age story essentially, and I think I'm just growing weary of this kind of dynamic in shonen stories of high schoolers that don't know what they want to do with their lives, because that is a fair reality that high schoolers face. As a secondary school teacher, I know that firsthand. But
Yeah.
it's so weird when animes take a very passive character in their main role or their main character. I mean, if I want to complain more about Tachamichi and Tokyo Revengers this season, but it's kind of that. It's like, why are you putting yourself out there when nothing about your character says you should put yourself out there? So it's another aspect that I enjoyed, that he changes over these first three episodes. Is like you get endeared with this character.
I feel like after hearing that, I feel like you're going to be telling your students, like, okay, kids, don't go out there and join in gangs or go to ramen noodle shops where the people look suspect just because you want to change up your pace of life.
No, I'm not a parent, so that's not my job. If my students want to smoke with me, then they can smoke with me. If they want to drink with me, they can drink with me, whatever. I'm not that kind of teacher. I'm not a moral arbiter for right or wrong, but it's like, hey, maybe drug use, or like, did you think about the consequences, son? Are you winning, son? But I do get into dad mode like that, but it's more like, yeah, you're free to make your wrong choices. So yeah, he's making a wrong choice. He's making a wrong choice, honestly. Like, he's intentionally, like, even in the opening scene where he's like describing himself, he's like, you have to get a picture. You have to get like, to see the whole image of humanity, you have to be somewhere for an amount of time to gather up the pixels. And he's like sleeping on the rooftop, saying like, I'm just a pixel and that's all I'll ever be. So he's wanting to have purpose, and I guess that's endearing, that he's lost and he wants to be found. So, or maybe I'm reading into it.
No, 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 no. That's a good thing because I forgot about what he said about the pixels, and I remember like at the end of the episode, he felt like he found more resolution, right? That his pixel fit into a picture. I guess if we were to make this a lesson of the week sort of thing, those type of people that's trying to find purpose, they need to be wary on where exactly they look because like, as we said, like this guy essentially turned to a life of crime because of this chick who doesn't want to leave her room, right? So it's just very. I guess, like I said, if there's a lesson to be learned, it's just that people who are looking for a purpose who don't necessarily know themselves at that point, they need to be wary. Otherwise, they'll become something that they never wanted to be to begin with, and it would be very negative on their life. Enough of Sonic Says for this episode. We're here to discuss uh, Resurrect or Rebury, and I'm not gonna lie, like when I first was watching it and I thought that, yeah, and I realized that it was gonna be a detective duo, I was like, oh no, this is another one. I'm just gonna rebury it. I couldn't because of the characters. So I'm gonna make it a resurrect for all the reasons that I had mentioned earlier. What about you, Jay? Are you gonna resurrect or rebury it?
A quick caveat, because it
Yes.
caught me by surprise that the first episode is actually 45, 46 minutes long.
Yes.
And it does, like, I've never seen that with an anime. I can't even recall another example of that ever happening. And it doesn't feel justified at all because the story is self contained. And again, it's a
Hmm.
very episodic case by case story because it's a detective story, of course. It's a buddy cop adventure, even though it's like a small group of mercenaries, essentially, given that one of the kids is a gun nut. After, like, episode 2 and 3 are like basically together because it's telling one half of the story. So
Hmm.
again, episode 2 is actually technically 40 minutes long as well. So there's no overarching plot introduced. There's no antagonist, which I don't think there will be one. There might be something that happens with his father because his father, the main character's father, is kind of aloof and might be doing some shady business. So it might
Hmm.
go in that direction as well. So Alice might send him on a case to investigate his own father. So that might be a thing, but that's just me projecting. But as it stands, with just 12 episodes, with the intriguing premise of a um, neat detective agency, even by that, by its own virtue, is kind of interesting and engaging, and seeing that the main character grows in the first 3 episodes to throwing his life into headlong into danger when it introduces him as being apathetic and uninterested in even the simple people around him because he has a childhood friend. No, he has a classmate that pulls him
Yeah.
into a gardening club. So I'm thinking something bad's going to happen to her as well.
That's what it is. It's it sort of reminds me of the joke. You know how like marijuana is the gateway drug, gardening club is the gateway gang.
Yeah, because like originally he was like in the computer club that had no members, which isn't a thing in Japanese schools, but I think it's a private institution. But anyways, so
Hmm.
after saying all of that, I'm going to give it a verdict of resurrect because of the thing I just said, but also because it feels like a self-contained story, given that the light novel is only 3 volumes. So if it's a case by case and going through different levels of crimes and seeing how Alice can help solve it and what his contribution is going to be to the um, solving process, the deduction process.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting enough. So I'm going to give it a resurrect.
No, no, I definitely agree with you, and I know I just wanted to mention like the reason why I'm okay with this episodic type of story is because you get a sense of consequences, right? So even though it's episodic in nature, the events of each story uh influences and feeds into to the next one. So like I said before, like the character took a part-time job with the ramen noodle shop, right? That he wasn't employed before, but now, he is. And even in the second story, like because of what they were doing with the money laundering, they had some people come by and shake down the ramen noodle shop, right? So you get this sense of uh stakes with each case that you know it's going to impact like the rest of their day-to-day schedule. So I guess like that's why, even though it's episodic in nature, there's still that sense of continuity in the sense that you can't pick and choose which episodes that you want to watch out of order, that sort of thing, that like there's still some sort of linear story to the overall story. But again, this was our final verdicts on God's Memo Pad, Kamisama's no Memochou. It's a resurrect from Jay and a resurrect from myself. And for our next episode, we will be going over
Blade!
Blade, Jay's pick.
Yeah, I'm so
You
excited.
sound
I'm so
what?
excited because we're finally done with these Marvel anime.
Oh my goodness. Well, I would say I was gonna say I told you so, Jay, but I feel like we have to experience them firsthand before I do I am thankful that you're letting me experience them firsthand, so I know for a fact that my fears were wrong. But who knows? Maybe Blade is actually good. We'll just have to see next week. But aside from that, do you have any words from us, Jay, for us, Jay, before we sign off?
There are only two professions in the whole world that give meaning to those who died and have lost. They're writers and detectives. Writers are the only ones able to revive what was lost through their visions. Detectives are the only ones able to dig up the grave and bring back lost information. But the information us detectives dig up is nothing short than the truth as recorded in Heaven's Memo Pad.